Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So I think that it is time for me to tell my story or a story that part of my life that has what things have brought me to where I am right now. Now, this story involves a place that I worked. It was a company. It was a multifamily, in other words, a property management company that managed higher end apartment complexes. And I didn't work on the properties, but I did work out of the corporate office. So I was hired there in 2013. I was hired as a property accountant. I had just recently gotten my second bachelor's degree. It was in accounting, makes sense. And so I started working as an accountant. In the beginning, it was enjoyable learning the new processes, but I quickly became very bored with it because if you know me, if you know my personality type, and my work style, I'm not, there are people who deal very well with routine, with doing the exact same thing over and over and over, day after day, week after week, month after month, and they find things in the job that maybe it's like a puzzle to them and they're putting it together and that really appeals to them. And I have nothing but respect for the people that excel in those types of professions. Unfortunately, that wasn't me. So I quickly became bored with it. The quality of my work didn't necessarily suffer, but I lacked the motivation really to get it done timely. Luckily for me, after about maybe 19 months, just short of 2 years, the senior VP of finance came to me, who was in charge of the department, came to me and asked me if I would be willing to take on a new role. And that role was the National Accounting Performance Director. So in effect, it was the trainer for the accountants. I have an extensive background in training and human resources, so I said yes. I said yes quickly. And eventually, after the transition took place, I was able to move into that position. So I entered into that new role. Now, in this role, I had two supervisors. So I had the VP of Finance, who was my supervisor generally, although not too involved. And then I had the Director of Training, who was my direct supervisor. Now, he typically, his staff in general, his trainers were trainers for the properties. They were trainers primarily of sales. And so he knew the sales approach to training, which is high energy, very motivational. And he had a hard time managing me, his words, not mine, because I took a lower key approach to managing or not managing, but training the accountants. It was still higher energy than the accountants were used to, but lower energy than you would get with the sales. And it took me a while to find that right balance. Now, another thing to add about this role is that it turned into two full-time roles. So as so often happens in corporate America. So I was tasked with training the accountants and getting their turnover down, because at the time they had about a 50% turnover. But at the same time, I was tasked on the financial training for all the properties, and we had about 350, 400 properties. So I was also tasked with doing that. Each one was its own full-time job. In time, I started to feel burned out. At times, I would go to schedule a vacation, and before I could schedule it, my supervisor would schedule another class for me. And so a lot of times I'd have to push my vacation back and back and back. And I did get a little burned out before the end. But here's the thing. I developed the training for the accountants. I designed the classes. I designed both online and in-person classes. I held quarterly events for them. I designed the onboarding program for new accountants. I designed a development program lining out what each person had to master the skills in order to progress to the next level. And I even designed a leadership development program. But that never took off because there was a lot of pushback from the leadership in the accounting department, not all the leaders, but enough, saying that we don't have time for training. So they decided that this leadership development program was not going to go forward, which is a shame. So I continued working with the accountants, with the new hires, and within 18 months, I was able to get turnover from about 50% down to 3%, which was unheard of in this industry. And keep in mind, this company had never had turnover that low in this department. Time passes, about 18 months in, I find out from the senior VP of finance that she's decided to cut my position from the budget and that I would be assigned to another position, even though she didn't know what that was going to be at the time. She said I had done enough that the managers could handle it. I had my doubts, but we went along with it. I took another position in the company, which was not a good fit for me at all. It was all process and precision, which is not, that's the biggest stretch for me. If you move me from what I do well into process precision, that's going to be the biggest stretch for me, the hardest for me to master. And I did okay in it, but not great. Over the next 2 years, I watched the department. I had access to certain information in the system, and I watched the turnover rate begin to climb, slowly at first, but by the end of 2 years, I believe it was up to about 73%. So in 1 year, that department lost 73, almost 3/4 of its employees. They left the company for whatever reason. Most of it was not good. Some people were leaving within 2 weeks because they start a new position, they get basically told what to do over a day or two. And then in 2-3 weeks, they never saw their manager. And so they left because that did not provide the environment and the support that they wanted. There was also at times not a very good match between the new hires and the manager, because we all know managers have different styles. And because there was not a good match, you know, that's one of the leading contributors to turnover, is when there's not a match to the manager. There's others, but that's one of the big ones. So here's my mistake, because I started thinking about that a lot. Why didn't it stick? We had a training program in place. I made sure that the online modules were up to date and in place before I transitioned out. And actually, even a little afterwards, I was working on them. Why didn't it stick? I've thought about that a lot. And here's what I've come up with. The reason it didn't stick is because the leadership was never invested. Now, I'm not talking about all the leaders, because most of the managers didn't want my position eliminated because it was working. And it made their jobs easier when they didn't have to keep training new people every couple of months. But the top leadership was not invested in it. The top leadership was not on board in the way they should be, and didn't understand what needed to be done. I didn't spend enough time with them. I should have focused more on connecting with the leadership and getting them invested into the program, because then maybe it would have stuck a little better. But that didn't happen. Because of that, I shifted my emphasis from working with rank and file employees, although I'm more than happy to do that even now, especially in training. I do trainings for corporate environments now and then. But my primary focus is on leaders, because if you can get the leaders involved, if you can get the leaders to embrace what needs to happen, everything trickles downhill. There's an old saying that everything rises or falls with leadership, and that's true. Leadership has to be invested in the development of their people, in a certain methodology of development, a certain plan or program. And that has to be, it has to go from the very top and trickle down from your CEO to your VPs, to your managers, all the way down to the newest employee. or it's not going to stick. It has to be the culture of your company. And so now that is what I concentrate on. I concentrate on developing leaders who embrace development as a core principle of their organizational culture. And development must be differentiated from training because they're not the same thing. They're related, but they're not the same thing. And they're both important, but not the same thing. So that is what I learned. And that is why I focus now primarily on leaders. And I will say I'm having some great success with the people I work with, some amazing people. And I hope to do this for the rest of my life. So that's my story. If you have any questions, let me know, and we'll see you next time.